The sound of betrayal isn't loud. It's a whisper, a signature, a small gesture that changes the entire course of your life. That day, sitting in my own kitchen in Dallas, Texas, I realized my daughter had just decided I was disposable. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 72 years old, and for most of my life, I thought patience and sacrifice were the secret ingredients that kept a family together. I believed that if you kept saying yes, yes to your husband's career, yes to your children's needs, yes to your neighbors when they needed a hand, you'd be rewarded with loyalty, gratitude, and maybe a little peace in your old age. But that's not what happened. It began one humid afternoon in late September. Dallas heat doesn't care what the calendar says. It burns through autumn like it owns the place. I had just finished my chair yoga session online, something I picked up after my husband passed away 3 years earlier, when I heard the front door slam. It was my daughter, Melissa. 36 years old, divorced, mother of 2, and forever walking into my house like a storm front. No one invited. "Mom," she said, her voice cracked, her hair a mess, mascara smudged like she'd been crying in the car. "We need to talk. Now." I closed my laptop, slid it across the kitchen table, and gave her my full attention. With Melissa, every crisis was urgent. Every disaster was a 5-alarm fire. And every solution usually cost me money. But this time felt different. She sank into the chair across from me, pressing her hands flat against the table. "Mom, I'm worried about you." I almost laughed. Worried about me? For the past 5 years, our conversations had been about her. Her bills, her kids' tuition, her ex-husband's failures, her rent. I couldn't remember the last time she had asked how I was doing. Still, those words, "I'm worried about you," landed like a tender kiss against my tired heart. "Worried about me?" I asked, trying not to sound too hopeful. She nodded, leaning forward. "Yes, I've been talking to my friend Lauren. You remember from high school? She works at the credit union now. She says there's this wave of scams targeting seniors. People your age are losing their homes, their savings. I couldn't sleep last night thinking about it." Her eyes shone with what looked like genuine fear, and for a second, I softened. I thought, maybe this is the moment. Maybe my daughter has finally stopped seeing me as a bottomless ATM and started seeing me as a mother again. An aging mother who might need her daughter's protection. I reached for her hand. It was cold and damp. "Sweetheart, I'm careful. I don't give information to strangers. I never open the door unless I know who it is." "That's not enough anymore, Mom." Her voice sharpened. "These scammers are sophisticated. They can take your social security number, steal your identity, even trick you into signing away your property." Her words sent a chill down my spine. My house, the small 2-story in Oak Cliff that my husband and I bought 47 years ago, was more than walls and a roof. It was where I raised my children, where I took care of my husband through chemo until the very end, where every creak in the floorboard carried a memory. The idea of losing it felt like losing myself. "What can I do?" I whispered. Melissa's eyes flickered with something. A flash of triumph she couldn't quite hide. "Well," she said slowly, "Lauren told me there's a way to protect your home. You can temporarily transfer the deed to someone you trust. That way no scammer can touch it, just until things calm down." My stomach nodded. Transfer the deed to someone I trust, to my daughter. She kept talking, painting the picture of scammers lurking at my doorstep, warning me of friends who had been ruined, feeding me horror stories ripped from the internet. Her voice was honey. Her argument was poison. And for weeks after, she pressed harder. Every visit, every phone call, every text was about the danger I was supposedly in. She even had my grandson, Jacob, ask me, "Grandma, are bad people going to take your house?" That was the moment I knew she wasn't just scared. She was scheming. Because when your child uses your grandchild's innocent face to pry something from you, it's not about love anymore. It's about power. I didn't say no, though. Not right away. I nodded. I listened. I pretended to believe her. And quietly, I began my own plan. See, what Melissa didn't know was that for 6 months, I'd been documenting everything. Every little manipulation. Every sob story. Every push. I'd been writing it all down in a leather-bound journal my husband gave me for our 50th anniversary. He used to say, "Write the truth, Evie. One day, you'll need it." And he was right. The day Melissa dropped a folder of transfer papers on my kitchen table, smiling like a wolf dressed in silk, was the day I stopped being the mother who always said yes. I looked her dead in the eye, slid the folder back, and whispered, "Check the last page, sweetheart." For the first time, I saw her hands tremble. Because while she thought she had set the trap, she was the one standing in it. That's where my story truly begins. The story of how a 72-year-old widow from Dallas stopped being a victim and started being a fighter. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. Because what I did next is something my daughter will never, ever forget. By the way, if you're still here with me, tell me in the comments what city you're listening from. I'd love to know where this story is reaching. And if it touched you, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories like this one that I want to share with you. The quiet after betrayal is deceptive. It feels like peace, but underneath it's a storm, twisting and pulling, waiting for its moment to break. That night, after Melissa shoved the transfer papers into her purse and stormed out, my house felt heavier than ever. I sat in the same wooden chair my husband bought me 30 years ago, hands trembling against the worn armrests, staring at the walls filled with family photographs. All those smiling faces, all those years of sacrifice and love. And here I was, realizing my own daughter was willing to trade me for a stack of signed papers. I didn't sleep much. When I did, I dreamed of my husband, Thomas. He was standing in our backyard, leaning on the old oak tree, his face shadowed like it had been in those last months of chemo. He didn't speak, but his eyes said enough. "Evie, don't let her do this." By morning, I knew what I had to do. I dialed the one person who had never sugarcoated anything for me. Margaret Green. Margaret and I met 40 years ago in the accounting office at a construction company in Dallas. Where I was soft-spoken and polite, Margaret was blunt as a sledgehammer. She never had kids, never wanted them, and maybe that's why she could see through mine so clearly. She had been warning me about Melissa for years. When she picked up, her voice was as sharp as ever. "Evie Carter, you only call this early when the world's ending. What's she done now?" I told her everything. The scams, the pressure, the papers. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then she said, "Baby, your daughter isn't worried about scammers. Your daughter is the scammer." Her words stung, but I needed them. "Margaret, what do I do?" "You fight fire with fire. You don't tell her no. Not yet. You nod, you smile, you let her think she's winning. And meanwhile, we get you covered legally. You still got Thomas's lawyer?" I thought about it. Daniel Price, the man who handled our will and the deed to this house. An old-school attorney in his 60s, always wore bow ties, the kind who read every line of a contract twice. "Yes," I said softly. "Good. Call him today. And, Evie?" "Yes?" "Stop thinking like a mom. Start thinking like a survivor." I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Stop thinking like a mom. How do you do that when being a mom is the only identity you've ever known? But Margaret was right. Melissa had stopped thinking like a daughter a long time ago. So I called Daniel Price. His secretary put me through immediately, He'd known me since Thomas and I walked into his office as newlyweds in the 70s. His voice was warm, steady. "Evelyn, what can I do for you?" I told him everything, my voice shaking at first, then growing steadier as the truth poured out. "Evelyn," he said when I finished, "what your daughter's attempting is called financial elder abuse. Texas law takes it very seriously. If she's pushing you to sign documents under false pretenses, that's fraud." My stomach tightened. Fraud. A word I'd never thought I'd hear attached to my own child. "What can I do?" I asked. "We can prepare protective documents. Power of attorney that stays in your hands. Clauses that prevent any transfer without your explicit consent. Medical evaluations proving your full competence. If she tries to challenge you, we'll have everything ready." I exhaled, shaky but relieved. "Daniel," I said, "I don't want to destroy her. I just want her to stop." "Evelyn," he said gently, "sometimes the only way to stop someone is to show them you're not weak." The next few weeks became a strange performance. Melissa would come by with coffee, smiling too brightly, and say things like, "Mom, you really should get this deed thing handled before it's too late. You don't want strangers taking what's ours." I'd nod, sip my tea and say, "You're right, sweetheart. I'll think about it." Inside, my journal grew thicker. Every manipulation went on the page. Every guilt trip. Every half-truth. Margaret called it my arsenal. At night, I'd sit in my quiet house, flipping through old photo albums. Melissa as a baby in my arms. Her first day of kindergarten. Her wedding day when she wore that lace gown and cried as I pinned the veil. How had we gotten from that moment to this? Her plotting against me in my own kitchen. One memory hit me hardest. It was Christmas, maybe 20 years ago. Thomas was still alive. The kids were teenagers. Melissa had wanted some expensive leather boots. I told her we couldn't afford them that year. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, slamming doors, sulking through dinner, punishing me for saying no. And then on Christmas morning, she opened the box, and there they were, the boots. Thomas had gone behind my back, taken money from our savings, and bought them for her. The way Melissa's face lit up that morning, the way she hugged him and not me. I remember thinking, she's learning that manipulation works. Maybe this had been building for years. Maybe I'd been blind. One Friday afternoon, she came with a new tactic. She brought my grandson, Jacob, now 11, his sneakers scuffed, his eyes tired. He climbed onto my couch, grabbed the remote, and called out, "Grandma, Mom says you're worried about losing the house. Is that true?" Melissa stood behind him, arms folded, watching me like a hawk. I forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. Grandma's fine. But Mom says bad people are trying to take it. She says if you sign some papers, we'll all be safe." My heart cracked. "Jacob," I said softly. "Grandma's house has been safe for almost 50 years. Don't you worry about a thing." Melissa's smile faltered. She knew I wasn't biting. When Jacob went to the kitchen for cookies, Melissa leaned close. Her whisper was sharp as a knife. "Mom, if you don't do this, I can't promise the kids won't be hurt when it all falls apart. Do you really want them living through that?" I froze. It wasn't just pressure anymore. It was a threat wrapped in motherly guilt. That night, I called Margaret. "She dragged Jacob into it," I told her, voice breaking. Margaret didn't hesitate. "Evie, it's time to stop playing defense. Time to set your trap." The following Monday, Daniel Price had me in his office. We spent hours drafting documents that looked, at first glance, like exactly what Melissa wanted. Transfer of title, protective clauses, signatures. But buried in the fine print were protections so airtight that Melissa could have signed her own name in blood, and she still wouldn't own a brick of my house. Daniel leaned across the polished oak desk. "She won't read this carefully. People like her never do. They see what they want to see." I left with the papers in a neat manila folder. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift. Because the moment Melissa pushed me too far, the moment she demanded my signature, was the moment I'd be ready to hand her exactly what she thought she wanted, and watch it crumble in her hands. But there was one thing I wasn't ready for. 2 weeks later, Margaret called me in a rush. "Evie, I need you to sit down." "What is it?" I asked around about Melissa. A friend of mine works at a collections agency. "Evie, your daughter owes over $60,000 in credit card debt, and she's been denied 2 loans already. That's why she wants your house." The room spun. My daughter hadn't just been trying to protect herself. She was drowning, and she wanted to pull me down with her. That night, I sat on my porch, the Dallas sky thick with summer stars, and realized something bone deep. I could love my daughter. I could even forgive her one day. But I couldn't let her destroy me. And I wouldn't. Not anymore. They say a mother's love is unconditional. But what they don't tell you is that unconditional love can make you blind. Blind enough to walk into a fire, hoping your child won't let you burn. By the time October rolled around, the heat in Dallas had finally given way to the first cool fronts. Leaves drifted across my lawn in shades of rust and gold, the air crisp enough to bite. I sat on the porch swing, a blanket draped over my lap, the manila folder of legal documents resting heavy beside me. I kept staring at it, wondering how it had come to this, preparing to outsmart my own daughter. Melissa wasn't slowing down. If anything, she was turning up the pressure. Every call, every visit carried the same rhythm. "Mom, you need to do this. Mom, it's dangerous to wait. Mom, the kids will suffer if you don't protect the house." One evening, she arrived with 2 cups of Starbucks and that sugary smile she wore whenever she was about to sell me something. "Mom," she said, sliding the latte toward me. "I brought the papers again. I highlighted the spots you need to sign. We can knock this out in 10 minutes, and then I'll never bother you again about it." I smiled sweetly, tapping the manila folder that sat on my coffee table. "That's funny," I said, "because I've been working with Mr. Price, your dad's old lawyer. He gave me some papers, too. Safer ones." Melissa's smile twitched. "Mom, no offense, but Daniel Price is ancient. He doesn't understand how things work now." Lauren said. "There it is again," I interrupted. Lauren said, "Lauren this, Lauren that. Honey, I don't even think you've spoken to her in years." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I said carefully, "if this is really about protecting me, then you won't mind using the papers my lawyer drew up. After all, they're safer, right?" Melissa hesitated. For a moment, I saw the wheels turning in her head. Hesitation, calculation, and then surrender. "Fine," she said, reaching for the pen in her purse. "Where do I sign?" She didn't even skim the pages. Daniel was right. People like Melissa see what they want to see. She scribbled her name in all the right places, convinced she'd won. And I signed too. Steady, calm, as though this weren't the most dangerous game of chess I'd ever played. When it was done, she gathered the papers like a thief, pocketing jewels, her hands almost trembling with excitement. "Thanks, Mom," she said, kissing my cheek, the gesture cold and mechanical. "You won't regret this." As the door closed behind her, I whispered to myself, "Oh, honey, you will." The fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days later, Melissa called in a panic. "Mom, I need you to come with me to the bank. They said the documents are weird." "Weird?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. "They said you still have full rights over the property. They said I can't do anything without your written consent. What did you sign, Mom? What my lawyer gave me, I said evenly. You wanted protection. That's what you got. Her silence was volcanic. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth on the other end of the line. Mom, she hissed finally. Do you think this is funny? You embarrassed me in front of the bank. They treated me like some kind of criminal. I felt my pulse thudding, but my voice stayed calm. Melissa, if you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be embarrassed. She hung up on me. That night, guilt and relief wrestled inside me. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, sat by the kitchen window, and stared out at the streetlights glowing over the quiet neighborhood. Part of me wanted to cry. Cry for the little girl I raised. The daughter who used to fall asleep in my arms after thunderstorms. Where had she gone? But another part of me, the part that had been ignored, dismissed, taken for granted for decades, felt stronger than it had in years. For once, I wasn't the victim. The reprieve didn't last. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text from my grandson, Jacob. Grandma, Mom says you don't want us anymore. Is that true? I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Jacob, I will always want you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He didn't reply. That evening, Melissa showed up at my door without knocking. Her eyes were wild, her cheeks flushed. She barged in like she owned the place, pacing the living room. You made a fool out of me, she snapped. Do you have any idea what I'm dealing with? The debts? The late notices? The threats? You sit here in your cozy little house while I'm drowning. Her words cut deep. I thought of the years I'd bailed her out, the checks I'd written, the bills I'd paid, and yet, somehow, I was the villain in her story. Melissa, I said softly, you could have just asked me for help. The truth. That's all I ever wanted. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is you're old, Mom, and when you're gone, this house is mine anyway. Why not now? Her cruelty knocked the air from my lungs. For a moment, I saw not my daughter, but a stranger. I stood, my voice steady. Get out. Her eyes widened. What did you say? You heard me. Get out of my house, she sneered, grabbing her purse. Fine, but don't call me when you're too weak to live here alone. Don't expect me to take care of you. As the door slammed, I whispered into the silence. I never did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice. You're old, Mom. When you're gone, this house is mine anyway. The next morning, I called Daniel Price again. She's not going to stop, I told him. He sighed. Evelyn, I've seen cases like this before. Sometimes, children cross lines we never thought possible. You need to be prepared for the worst. What's the worst? She could try to claim you're incompetent, file for guardianship, get control of your finances and medical decisions. The words made me dizzy. The idea that my own daughter could drag me into court, declare me unfit, and take over my life. It felt like death while breathing. What do I do? I whispered. You get ahead of her, he said firmly. Medical evaluations, documentation, witnesses to her behavior. We build a wall she can't climb. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Then let's build it. The next weeks became a blur of doctor's visits and paperwork. I sat in sterile waiting rooms, answering memory tests, performing simple math, recalling lists of words. Each doctor signed off. No signs of cognitive decline. Fully competent. Every certificate felt like another brick in my wall. But Melissa wasn't sitting idle. One afternoon, my neighbor knocked on my door, her face hesitant. Evelyn, I don't mean to pry, but your daughter was here yesterday. She told me you're losing your memory, that you might need help soon. My stomach dropped. Melissa was laying the groundwork, whispering poison into the ears of anyone who might listen. That night, I opened my journal, my pen carving deep into the page. She thinks I'm weak. She thinks I'm alone. She thinks she's already won. But I've lived 72 years, and I'm not finished yet. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was making soup in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. Melissa stood there, flanked by a man in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Mom," she said sweetly, "this is Dr. Fields. He's here to do a little memory test, just to make sure you're okay." My blood ran cold. Dr. Fields smiled, but his eyes were condescending. "Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Carter. Just a few questions." I crossed my arms. "Do you have a court order?" He hesitated. "No, but your daughter. Then you have no business in my home." I snapped. "Get out. Both of you." Melissa's face twisted with rage. "Mom, why are you fighting me? I'm just trying to help." "Help?" I spat. "Dragging strangers into my house to declare me incompetent? That's not help. That's betrayal." Her cheeks flushed red. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, voice steady as stone. "You will." That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, the soup untouched. For the first time, I truly saw the battlefield. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about my freedom, my dignity, my very identity. And I would not let my own daughter strip that from me. Not while I still had breath in my body. There's a moment in every war when you realize you can't go back. Not to the way things were. Not to forgiveness that comes easy. Not to the comfort of pretending blood is thicker than betrayal. That moment for me came in a courthouse waiting room, staring at the beige walls and the fake fern in the corner, while my daughter prepared to convince a judge that her own mother was insane. It started with a knock on my door on a chilly Tuesday morning. A man in a navy blazer, holding a stack of papers. His face was polite, but his eyes carried pity. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes?" He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." The words echoed in my ears. My knees went weak, but I didn't let him see. After he left, I sat on my couch, tore the envelope open, and began to read. Petition for guardianship, filed by Melissa Carter. In black and white legal jargon, my daughter had accused me of significant cognitive decline, financial recklessness, and inability to manage daily affairs. She was asking the court for full control of my assets, my medical decisions, and my home. In other words, she was trying to own me while I was still breathing. I couldn't stop shaking. My chest burned with rage and grief. I called Daniel Price immediately. "Daniel," I said, barely able to form the words. She filed. "I know," he said calmly. "I got a copy this morning." "You knew?" "I suspected it was coming. Evelyn, listen to me. We're ready. We have your medical evaluations, your journal, your witnesses. She thinks she's got the upper hand, but she's underestimated you." I wiped tears from my cheeks. "She's my daughter, Daniel. How did it come to this?" There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, "Because sometimes, Evelyn, love blinds us to the truth until it's too late." The weeks leading to the hearing were some of the loneliest of my life. Melissa cut off my grandchildren completely. No calls, no texts, no visits. When I reached out, Jacob texted back once. "Mom says we can't see you until she fixes things." It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I'd wake up in the mornings, make coffee, and sit at the kitchen table staring at the empty chairs where my grandkids used to eat pancakes on Saturdays. The silence of the house pressed on me like a weight. But I also found strength in that silence. I doubled down on my routine. Yoga on the old laptop, morning walks around the block, weekly dinners with Margaret. She'd bring her no-nonsense energy, making me laugh at things that should have made me cry. "Evie," she'd say, sipping her iced tea. "If Melissa thinks she can outsmart you, she's got another thing coming. You didn't survive 40 years of marriage, cancer caregiving, and the Texas heat to be taken down by your own kid." And I'd smile, because even if I didn't fully believe it, Margaret made me want to. The day of the hearing, I dressed with deliberate care. A navy dress, pearl earrings Thomas gave me for our 20th anniversary, hair pulled into a neat bun. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Dignity, Evelyn. That's your weapon." Daniel picked me up at 9 sharp. As we drove downtown, my stomach twisted like it was full of snakes. The courthouse was cold, sterile. Melissa stood across the lobby with her lawyer, a younger man in a slick suit, hair too perfect. She wore a beige blazer and black heels, like she was auditioning for sainthood. When our eyes met, her expression flickered. Not guilt, not sadness, but determination. She was ready to bury me alive if it meant getting what she wanted. The hearing began. Melissa's lawyer went first. His voice was rich, rehearsed. "Your Honor, this case is about protection. My client, Ms. Melissa Carter, is deeply concerned for her mother's well-being. Mrs. Carter has exhibited paranoia, hostility, and erratic financial behavior. She has isolated herself from family and is vulnerable to exploitation. We are here to ensure her safety and stability." His words painted me as a fragile old woman, one step away from wandering into traffic. Melissa dabbed at fake tears with a tissue, nodding solemnly as if she were the saintly daughter rescuing her mother from herself. Then it was Daniel's turn. He rose, buttoned his bow-tie patterned jacket, and spoke with calm precision. "Your Honor, this is not a case about protection. This is a case about control. We will present medical evaluations from 3 independent doctors, confirming Mrs. Carter's competence. We will show financial records proving she manages her affairs responsibly. And we will provide evidence that Ms. Carter has attempted repeatedly to coerce her mother into signing over her home for her own financial gain. This, Your Honor, is elder abuse." Gasps murmured through the small courtroom. Melissa's face went pale, her mask cracking for a split second. When it was my turn to testify, my legs shook as I walked to the stand. But once I sat, once I swore the oath, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just Evelyn Carter, the mother who always said yes. I was Evelyn Carter, 72 years old, with a life full of choices, sacrifices, and strength no one could take away. "Mrs. Carter," Daniel began, "do you handle your own bills?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I pay them online every month." "Do you cook, clean, manage your home?" "Yes. I garden, I grocery shop, I even mow my own lawn when I feel like it. Have you ever been diagnosed with dementia or cognitive decline?" "No." Then he asked the hardest question. "Why do you think your daughter filed this petition?" My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "Because she's drowning in debt. And instead of asking me honestly for help, she decided to take everything I have. My house, my money, my independence. She wants to take my life before I'm done living it." The courtroom went silent. Melissa's lawyer objected, called it speculation, but the judge overruled. I looked straight at my daughter. Her eyes were glassy, her jaw clenched. And for a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. When Melissa testified, Daniel tore through her like a scalpel. "Miss Carter," he said, "is it true you asked your mother to transfer her house into your name?" "Yes, but..." "Is it true you told her it was to protect her from scammers?" Yes, but... And is it true that shortly before this, you were denied a bank loan because you lacked collateral? Her face crumpled. I was just trying to take care of my family. Daniel's voice sharpened. By lying to your mother? By manipulating your son into asking her about bad people stealing the house? By bringing a so-called doctor into her home without a court order? Melissa stammered. I was desperate. And desperation justifies fraud? Her silence was answer enough. The judge recessed for an hour. I sat in the waiting room, heart pounding, Margaret's words echoing in my head. Stop thinking like a mom. Start thinking like a survivor. When the judge finally returned, the courtroom hushed. After reviewing the evidence, he said, "This court finds that Mrs. Evelyn Carter is fully competent to manage her affairs. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, given the troubling evidence of manipulation, the court orders that Ms. Melissa Carter is to have no contact with her mother for 6 months, except in case of emergency." Bang! The gavel came down. It was over. Or at least that battle was. As I left the courthouse, Melissa approached me, her face streaked with mascara, eyes blazing with fury. "You ruined me," she spat. "Do you even care what happens to your grandkids now? Do you care what happens to me?" I looked at her, my daughter, my betrayer, and for the first time, I felt nothing but steel inside me. "You ruined yourself," I said. "I just stopped you from ruining me too." And I walked away. That night I sat on my porch swing under the Texas stars, the air cool against my skin. I thought of Thomas, of the years we built together, of the house that held our love. And I realized something. Melissa might have lost in court, but she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because people who taste power, even a glimpse of it, rarely let go so easily. And the war between mother and daughter was far from over. You'd think winning in court would feel like victory, that the gavel slamming down would silence every fear, that the truth, once spoken, would heal the cracks between a mother and her daughter. But the truth doesn't heal when the person who hurt you refuses to change. The truth just becomes another weapon. The first week after the hearing was eerily quiet. My phone didn't buzz. My doorbell didn't ring. For the first time in years, Melissa wasn't orbiting around my house, circling with demands and half-truths. I should have felt peace. Instead, I felt haunted. Because silence, when it comes from your child, is never peace. It's punishment. And I knew she was out there, simmering, plotting. One afternoon I was folding laundry when I heard voices outside. Peeking through the curtains, I saw Jacob and his sister Lily walking home from school. Melissa wasn't with them. They were trudging down the sidewalk with backpacks nearly bigger than their bodies. I rushed to the porch, heart pounding. "Jacob!" I called softly. "Lily!" They stopped, their little faces lighting up like lanterns. "Grandma!" Lily cried, running to me before Jacob tugged her back nervously. "Mom says we're not supposed to talk to you," Jacob whispered, his voice caught between loyalty and longing. My throat ached. I crouched down to his level. "Jacob, listen to me. Whatever your mom told you, it isn't true. I love you. I'll always love you. That will never change." Lily's eyes brimmed with tears. "She said you don't want us anymore." I pulled them both into my arms, breathing in the familiar scent of crayons and peanut butter, holding on like I could protect them from every lie in the world. "That's not true," I whispered fiercely. "You are my heart. Don't ever doubt that." A car horn blared. Melissa's SUV screeched around the corner, her window rolling down. "Kids, get in the car now." Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Jacob pulled away, panic in his eyes. "We have to go, Grandma." They bolted to the car. Melissa's glare met mine across the street. Icy, venomous. And then she drove off, leaving me standing on the porch with my arms aching from their absence. That night, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea, but it went cold, untouched. The victory in court hadn't solved anything. Melissa had lost the battle, but she was willing to use the kids as pawns in her next war. And for the first time, I asked myself, how much damage can a mother endure before she stops being a mother and starts being just a woman fighting for survival? Margaret stopped by the next morning, as she often did. She plopped down at my kitchen table with a bag of kolaches and her usual frankness. "You look like hell, Evie," she said, tearing into a sausage roll. "Thanks," I muttered. She studied me. "You saw the kids, didn't you?" My silence was enough. Margaret reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You can't save them from her lies right now, but you can make sure you're here when they need the truth." Her words hit me hard, because deep down, I knew that was the only weapon I had left. Longevity. Staying strong, refusing to disappear. But Melissa wasn't done. A week later, I got a call from the school counselor. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently. "Jacob told his teacher that his grandmother doesn't love him anymore. He was very upset." My chest tightened. "That's not true. I adore that boy." "I believe you," she said. "But he's confused. Children internalize things. I just thought you should know." After I hung up, I sat in my silent living room, shaking with rage. Melissa wasn't just lying to me. She was poisoning her children's minds against me. And I couldn't fight back without hurting them more. It was a trap with no clean exit. That Friday night, Melissa showed up at my house again. She didn't knock. She barged in like she always had, as though my home belonged to her by divine right. "You think you won, don't you?" she snapped, her eyes blazing. "You think humiliating me in court fixed everything?" I set down my teacup. My hands were steady. "I didn't humiliate you, Melissa. You humiliated yourself." She laughed bitterly. "You really don't get it, do you? The kids are mine. The future's mine. You can hide behind your lawyer and your little papers, but at the end of the day, you're old. Time is on my side, not yours." Her words chilled me more than any threat, because she was right about one thing. Time. I didn't have forever, and she was counting on that. "I may be old," I said quietly, "but I'm not weak. Don't mistake the two." She smirked. "We'll see." Then she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving the scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway like smoke after a fire. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Melissa's words replaying over and over. "The future is mine." And I realized she wasn't just after my house. She was after control of the entire narrative. She wanted my grandkids to believe her version of the story, where I was the selfish villain who abandoned them. If she succeeded, then even if I kept my house, I'd lose something far more precious. Their love. And that I could not allow. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Carlos Mendoza, a former Dallas PD detective who now worked independently. He was in his 50s, stocky, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Carter," he said during our first meeting at his office downtown, "I specialize in family financial abuse. If your daughter is spreading lies, I'll document it. If she's planning something new, I'll find out." I slid my journal across the desk. "This is everything I've written down. Every manipulation, every threat. Start here." Carlos skimmed through it, his brows furrowed. She's dangerous, ma'am. Desperate people always are. But don't worry. We'll shine a light on every shadow. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. 2 weeks later, Carlos called me with an update. "Mrs. Carter, you need to hear this in person." We met at a diner near downtown, the kind with sticky booths and coffee that tastes like ash. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, transcripts, reports. Melissa had been meeting with real estate agents, asking about the value of my house, talking about how quickly she could sell if it were hers. My blood turned to ice. "She doesn't just want the deed," Carlos said grimly. "She wants to liquidate. Fast." I stared at the evidence, my hands trembling. My daughter wasn't just trying to take my house. She was planning to erase it. Sell the walls that held my life like they were nothing but a quick payday. I closed the folder, my jaw tight. "Then we stop her," I said. That night I sat at my kitchen table, the evidence spread before me, my journal open beside it. I thought of Thomas, of how he always said, "Evie, write the truth. One day you'll need it." He was right. The truth was all I had left. And if Melissa wanted a war, I'd fight it with every ounce of truth I had. Even if it meant destroying whatever fragile thread still tied us together. People think the worst betrayal is losing your money or your home. But the worst betrayal is when your child tries to bury you alive while you're still breathing. Carlos didn't waste time. A week after our diner meeting, he called me again. His voice was low, urgent. "Mrs. Carter, we need to meet, tonight." I could hear noise in the background. Traffic, maybe the hum of a parking lot. My pulse quickened. "Where?" "Your place. Less eyes." I hung up and spent the next 20 minutes pacing my kitchen. The clock ticked too loudly. The refrigerator hummed. Every shadow looked suspicious. When Carlos finally knocked, I opened the door to find him holding another thick folder. His expression was grim. "This is worse than I thought," he said as he stepped inside. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Melissa had tried to trick me with those transfer papers. Carlos opened the folder and spread the contents across the wood. "There's no easy way to say this," he said. "Your daughter's not just talking to real estate agents. She's been consulting attorneys again. 3 different ones." My chest tightened. "For what?" He tapped one page. "Guardianship. She's still trying to take control of you, but this time she's going a step further." "A step further?" My throat felt dry. "She's claiming you're showing signs of early dementia. That you forget conversations, that you wander at night, that you leave the stove on. She's building a case to prove you're unsafe on your own." I gasped. "That's a lie. I've never—" "I know," Carlos said quickly. "We've got your medical evaluations to prove it. But Evelyn, she's not stopping there. She's been talking with a long-term care facility." The room spun. "What kind of facility?" He looked me in the eye. "Assisted living. Maybe even memory care." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The image hit me like a freight train. Me, stripped of my independence, locked in a sterile room. My house sold out from under me. My grandchildren told that Grandma was too far gone to fight back. "She wants to put me away," I whispered. Carlos nodded grimly. "And she's laying the groundwork. If she can convince a judge you're a danger to yourself, she can have you committed. Temporarily at first, but long enough to get power of attorney. After that..." His words trailed off. They didn't need finishing. I pressed my palms flat against the table, steadying myself. "No," I said finally. My voice surprised me. It was calm, firm, almost cold. "I won't let her bury me alive." Carlos leaned back, studying me. "Then you need to be ready. Judges don't care about family drama. They care about evidence. Melissa's smart enough to fabricate just enough to make you look unstable." "What kind of evidence?" I asked. "Neighbors saying you seem confused. Teachers saying you scared the kids. Even little things, like forgetting where you put your keys or leaving a light on. She'll twist it all." I thought of my neighbor repeating Melissa's lies, of the school counselor calling me about Jacob's confusion. My stomach churned. "She's already planting seeds," I murmured. Carlos nodded. "Exactly. That's why we need to plant our own. Witnesses, proof of your competence, a paper trail she can't erase." The next few weeks became a blur of preparation. Carlos shadowed Melissa, documenting her meetings. He kept a log of every lie she told about me. He recorded conversations when she thought no one was listening. Meanwhile, Daniel Price filed protective motions, tightening every legal safeguard we could. We updated my will, my power of attorney, everything. And me? I became a woman on a mission. I attended every church service, every library event, every senior yoga class in town. I made sure people saw me sharp, engaged, fully present, not just to live my life, but to prove, quietly, that I wasn't the fragile woman Melissa wanted them to believe I was. It was exhausting, living every day as though I were on trial. But it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't just defending my house anymore. I was defending my name. Still, Melissa kept pushing. One evening, just as the sun dipped low over Dallas, she showed up again. This time, she didn't storm in angry. She walked in calm, composed, almost eerily polite. She sat at my table like nothing had happened, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Mom," she began, "I've been thinking. Maybe I came on too strong before. I don't want us to fight. I want to help." I narrowed my eyes. "Help with what?" "With your future." She smiled, sugar-coated and sharp. "It's hard living alone at your age. The house is too big. Wouldn't it be nice to downsize? Move into a retirement community where everything's taken care of?" My chest tightened. She was shifting tactics, less aggressive, more insidious. "I like my house," I said firmly. She tilted her head. "Mom, be reasonable. You get confused sometimes. You left the porch light on all night last week. Jacob noticed. He worries about you." I froze. One light bulb, and she was already weaving it into her case. "You've been talking to the kids about me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I talked to them about reality," she said smoothly. "They deserve to know the truth. That their grandmother isn't as strong as she used to be." My hands trembled, but I refused to let her see fear. "Melissa," I said coldly, "get out of my house." Her smile faded. "You can keep pushing me away, Mom. But eventually someone's going to believe me. And when they do, this house won't save you." After she left, I sat in the dark, shaking. That night, I dreamed I was trapped in a hospital bed, my wrists strapped, Melissa standing over me with a clipboard, signing away my life. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. And that's when I knew. It wasn't enough to defend myself. I had to go on the offensive. The next morning, I called Carlos. "It's time," I told him. "Time for what?" "To show her what happens when you underestimate your mother." Carlos set up a sting. He'd already recorded Melissa meeting with real estate agents. Now he wanted hard proof of her intent. To sell my house, to fabricate lies about my health, to manipulate my grandchildren. We planned it carefully. Carlos wired my living room with discreet audio recorders. I invited Melissa over, pretending to cave. "Fine," I said over the phone. "Bring the papers again. I'll sign whatever you want." Her eagerness was instant. "Really, Mom? You mean it?" "Yes," I said, forcing sweetness into my tone. Come tomorrow. We'll settle this once and for all." After I hung up, my hands shook. Setting a trap for your own child is the kind of thing that changes you forever, but there was no other way. The next day, Melissa walked in with a folder, her smile wide, her eyes glittering with victory. "Mom, you're making the right choice," she said, laying the papers on the table. I sat, calm, composed. "Remind me, sweetheart, what exactly happens after I sign?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, technically the house will be mine. But don't worry, I'll take care of everything. If I need to sell, I'll make sure you're settled in a nice place. You'll thank me later." Her words, dripping with casual cruelty, landed right on Carlos's recorder. I pressed further. "And what about the kids? You told Jacob I was forgetting things." She smirked. "Of course I did. He has to understand. The more people who believe you're slipping, the easier this gets. It's not personal, Mom. It's just strategy." I bit the inside of my cheek, fighting the urge to scream. But Carlos got it all, every damning word. When she left, hugging me with that fake warmth, I closed the door and collapsed against it, tears streaming down my face. This was my daughter, my own flesh and blood, talking about me like I was a pawn, planning to erase my life. But beneath the grief was fire, because now, finally, I had proof. And the war had officially turned. Some wars are fought with weapons, others are fought with words. And sometimes the most powerful weapon is catching someone speaking the truth when they think no one's listening. When Carlos played back the recordings, I sat frozen in my living room, every word stabbing me like a knife. "If I need to sell, I'll make sure you're settled in a nice place. You'll thank me later." The more people who believe you're slipping, the easier this gets. It's not personal, Mom. It's just strategy. Hearing Melissa's voice like that, cold, calculated, was like looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Carlos leaned back, folding his arms. "This is gold, Mrs. Carter. Judges eat this up. She dug her own grave with these words." But instead of relief, I felt grief. My daughter had confessed her betrayal in my own kitchen, her voice steady, her tone casual, like plotting her mother's downfall was no different than planning a trip to the mall. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to stop the tears. "Carlos, this isn't just evidence. This is my child, my baby girl." Carlos's voice softened. "I know. But Evelyn, you can't save her from herself. The best you can do is save yourself. Daniel Price nearly fell out of his chair when we played the recording in his office." "My God," he muttered, his bow tie askew. "This isn't just elder abuse. This is coercion, fraud, intent to defraud. Evelyn, we can take this to the DA." "The DA?" I asked, stunned. "District Attorney," he clarified. "Criminal charges. Melissa's crossed into felony territory here." The words hit me like a thunderclap. Felony, prison, my daughter in handcuffs. Part of me wanted to scream no, never. But another part of me, the part that had endured months of lies, manipulation, and threats, thought maybe this is the only way to stop her. Daniel leaned forward. "Evelyn, you don't have to decide today, but know this. She's not just dangerous to you. She's teaching those children that manipulation is normal. If you don't draw the line, who will?" I left his office with the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. That night, I sat on my porch swing, staring up at the Dallas sky. The stars were faint against the city glow, but I remembered sitting here with Thomas years ago, his hand warm in mine. "What would you do, Tom?" I whispered into the night. "Would you protect her or protect me?" The wind rustled the oak tree in the yard. The same tree where we'd once hung a tire swing for Melissa when she was 8. Back then, she'd laughed until her face was red, begging me to push her higher. Now she was the one trying to push me out of my home, out of my life. And I finally realized protecting her meant sacrificing myself. And Thomas would never have wanted that. A week later, Carlos called. "You should sit down for this one," he said. He'd followed Melissa to a meeting at a cafe in uptown Dallas. She wasn't with a real estate agent this time. She was with a man Carlos identified as a loan shark, someone tied to payday lending, the kind that preyed on desperation. "She's trying to use your house as collateral," Carlos explained. Told him once she got the deed, she'd sell fast and pay him back double. He laughed in her face but still agreed to give her a month. My stomach twisted. A month? That means... She's desperate. Desperate people get sloppy. That's good for us. But it also means she might get more reckless. I sat in stunned silence, realizing the truth. Melissa wasn't just scheming. She was sinking, clawing for air, willing to drown me to save herself. I decided then, if she wanted to burn down everything around her, I wouldn't be the match she used. Daniel filed a protective injunction on my behalf, citing the recordings, the evidence of fraud, and the harassment. The DA's office agreed to open a preliminary investigation. When Melissa was served, again, she exploded. She stormed to my house that evening, pounding on the door like she meant to break it down. "Mom, open this door!" she screamed. "You think you can ruin me? You think you can sick lawyers on me and keep my kids from me? You're pathetic." I didn't move. I stayed in the living room, my phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. She pounded again, voice cracking with fury. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You ungrateful old witch." The words cut deep, but not as deep as they once would have. Because now, I knew they weren't truth. They were desperation. When her voice finally broke into sobs, then silence, I sat in the dark, tears streaming down my face. This was my daughter, my baby, and she hated me enough to scream at my front door like a stranger. Days passed. The DA's office began quietly pulling records, interviewing neighbors. Carlos kept feeding them information. Daniel reassured me that everything was moving, but the waiting was torture. I jumped every time the phone rang. I flinched at shadows passing the windows. And the worst was the silence from my grandchildren. One night, Jacob slipped me a message through a mutual friend. A crumpled note, written in shaky handwriting. "Grandma, I miss you. Mom says bad things about you, but I don't believe her. I love you." I pressed that note to my heart and sobbed until my chest ached. The first real crack came when Melissa's own mask slipped in public. Carlos sent me a video he'd recorded. Melissa at a bar in Deep Ellum, drunk, bragging to her friends. "My mom's losing it. I'll have that house in my name by Christmas. Just watch. Old lady doesn't even know what's coming." Hearing her laugh, loud and mean, sent a chill down my spine. But it also made something inside me harden. No more second guessing. No more hesitation. I called Daniel the next morning. "Do it," I told him. "File the charges." The days that followed felt surreal. Melissa was summoned to the DA's office for questioning. She called me 6 times in a row, each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Mom, please, don't do this. We can fix this." "Mom, think of the kids. They need me. You'll ruin their lives too." "Mom, if you love me at all, drop this. Please." I listened to every message with tears in my eyes. But I didn't call back, because loving her didn't mean letting her destroy me anymore. Margaret came over the night before Melissa's indictment hearing. She poured us both a glass of wine, something I hadn't touched in months. "To survival, she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. To survival. But when I went to bed that night, I couldn't shake the gnawing thought. What happens to a mother when her child finally becomes her enemy? There's a sound that never leaves you. The sound of your own daughter's name being read out loud in a courtroom, not as a child, not as a bride, not as someone's mother, but as a defendant. The indictment hearing was held in a downtown Dallas courtroom on a gray Thursday morning. The sky looked bruised, swollen with rain, and the whole city seemed to hum with that restless energy before a storm. Daniel walked beside me through the metal detectors, his briefcase swinging, his face calm as always. But I could feel my knees trembling. We weren't here about my competence anymore. We weren't here about guardianship. We were here because the state of Texas had decided there was enough evidence to prosecute my daughter for elder fraud. When the bailiff called her name, Melissa Carter, stand and face the court, something inside me cracked. There she was, my baby girl, standing before the judge in handcuffs, her wrists chained together like a stranger. Her beige blazer was wrinkled, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes darted around the room until they landed on me. For a split second, the fury was gone. What I saw in her eyes was something much worse. Betrayal. You did this to me. Her gaze seemed to scream. And she wasn't wrong. The DA laid out the charges. Fraud, attempted coercion, misrepresentation. The words echoed through the courtroom, heavy as stones. Melissa's lawyer argued she was misunderstood, that this was a family dispute, blown out of proportion. But then the DA pressed play on the recordings Carlos had captured. Melissa's voice filled the courtroom, smug and calculating. If I need to sell, I'll make sure you're settled in a nice place. You'll thank me later. The more people who believe you're slipping, the easier this gets. It's not personal, Mom. It's just strategy. Gasps rippled through the spectators. Melissa's lawyer winced. And I sat frozen, my nails digging into my palms, because hearing those words in public, with strangers watching, made them feel like a second betrayal. The judge set bail. Melissa's lawyer scrambled to arrange it. And just like that, my daughter, my only daughter, was now officially a criminal defendant. When we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward, voices shouting questions. Mrs. Carter, do you feel vindicated? Do you want your daughter to go to prison? Was this about money or revenge? Daniel blocked them with his briefcase, but one question slipped through and lodged in my chest. Do you still love her? I froze. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was too complicated for a soundbite. That night, the house felt colder than ever. I sat in the living room with all the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old pipes, the steady thump of my heart. I thought of Melissa as a toddler, running barefoot through this same living room, giggling when Thomas chased her with a blanket like a cape. I thought of her graduation, her wedding, the day she put Jacob in my arms for the first time. And now I thought of her in handcuffs. How do you reconcile those images? How do you hold them both in your chest without breaking? The fallout was swift. Melissa's job put her on unpaid leave, pending resolution. Her neighbors whispered. Parents at the kids' school stared. And Jacob, poor Jacob, called me one night from a borrowed phone, his voice shaking. Grandma, why did you put Mommy in jail? My throat closed. Oh, Jacob, I didn't put her in jail. She made choices, sweetheart. Choices that hurt me. Choices that weren't fair. She cries a lot, he whispered. She says you hate her. Tears blurred my vision. I don't hate her, Jacob. I could never hate her. But sometimes, loving someone means not letting them hurt you anymore. He was quiet a long time. Then he whispered, "I love you, Grandma," before the line went dead. I sat clutching the phone, sobbing into the empty house. Melissa, meanwhile, turned her fury outward. She left me voicemails that swung between venom and desperation. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll die alone in that house. You ruined me, and for what? Your pride? Drop the charges, please. Please, I'll change. I'll do better. Just give me one more chance." I listened to them all, every word cutting deep. And yet, I didn't delete them. Because part of me needed to remember. Needed to remember that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's surrender. Daniel cautioned me not to engage. "Don't answer her calls, Evelyn. Don't meet her alone. She'll use anything you say against you." But the mother in me still ached. One Sunday after church, I lit a candle in the back pew, bowing my head, whispering a prayer I'd never thought I'd pray. "Lord, keep my daughter safe, even if she hates me. Let her find her way back, even if I can't be the one to guide her anymore." The wax melted slowly. The flame flickered. And I realized maybe that was what love looked like now. Loving her from a distance, even as she tried to destroy me. Weeks passed as we waited for the trial date. Carlos kept feeding the DA evidence, financial records, text messages, witness statements. Every piece painted the same picture. Melissa wasn't protecting me. She was trying to strip me of everything. But the closer we got to trial, the heavier the guilt pressed on my chest. Because trials don't just expose the guilty. They expose the family. They drag every private wound into the light, where strangers pick it apart. And I wasn't sure if I was strong enough for that. One night, Margaret came over with a casserole, her cure for everything from grief to gout. She set it on the counter and looked at me hard. "Evie, you're spiraling," she said bluntly. "You're second-guessing yourself again." I sighed. "Margaret, she's my daughter, my only child. How can I sit in a courtroom and watch them tear her apart?" "Because she tore you apart first," Margaret shot back. "And if you don't fight, she'll finish the job. Evie, you're not putting her in that courtroom. Her own choices did. All you're doing is surviving them." I stared at her, blinking back tears. And for the first time, I believed it. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through my house, touching the walls, the photographs, the furniture Thomas built by hand. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was my life, my marriage, my memories. And tomorrow, I would fight not just for the house, but for my right to live free, unbroken, unburied. Melissa might hate me forever for it, but I would not let her erase me. There are few things more unnatural than testifying against your own child. It feels like ripping open your chest in front of strangers, holding out your heart, and letting them decide whether it still beats. The trial began on a bright spring morning in Dallas. The air was heavy with the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the courthouse doors, but inside, everything felt cold and airless. Melissa sat at the defense table in a pale blue blouse, her hair pulled back tight. She looked younger than her 36 years, almost fragile, until I remembered the recordings. Until I remembered the venom in her voice. She didn't look at me. Not once. The jury filed in. 12 strangers who would decide if my daughter was guilty of betraying me. I wondered if they had children. If they'd ever been hurt by someone they loved so deeply. Would they see me as a mother, or as just another witness? The DA opened with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about a family squabble. It is about a daughter who systematically tried to strip her mother of her independence, her home, and her dignity for financial gain. Then came the evidence. The recordings played again, Melissa's words echoing in the courtroom. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just strategy." The jurors shifted uncomfortably. Some shook their heads. Melissa's lawyer countered, painting me as paranoid, exaggerating, unwilling to accept help. He tried to spin her words as jokes or venting. But even as he spoke, Melissa sat stone-faced, her eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance. When my turn came, my legs shook so badly I thought I'd fall. Daniel steadied me as I walked to the stand. I swore the oath, sat down, and took a deep breath. "Mrs. Carter," the DA began gently, "can you tell the jury who the defendant is to you?" I swallowed hard. "She's my daughter." The words alone nearly broke me. "And why are you here today?" "Because she tried to take everything from me. My home, my freedom, my name." "Can you explain how?" So I did. I told them about the transfer papers, the fake memory tests, the threats of guardianship, the lies to my grandchildren. I told them about the recordings, the late-night voicemails, the neighbors she poisoned with rumors. And I told them how it felt. "Imagine," I said, my voice trembling, "raising a child, loving her, sacrificing for her. Then imagine that same child standing across from you, trying to bury you alive while you're still breathing. That's what this has been. A living burial." The courtroom was silent. Then it was Melissa's lawyer's turn. He stood, buttoned his suit, and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Carter, isn't it true you sometimes forget things? Where you left your keys? Whether you locked the door?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "I'm 72. But forgetting where you left your keys is not dementia." He nodded. "Fair. But isn't it also true you've had arguments with your daughter before? That she's tried to help you?" "She's tried to control me," I corrected. His smile tightened. "Mrs. Carter, could it be that this is less about protection and more about resentment? About old wounds between you and your daughter?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I am not here out of resentment. I am here because I refuse to be erased." When Melissa took the stand, I barely recognized her voice. She wept, painting herself as a desperate mother, terrified for her children, overwhelmed by debt. "I only wanted to protect my mom," she sobbed. "She doesn't understand how vulnerable she is. I never meant to hurt her. I just didn't want to lose her." Some jurors looked sympathetic. My heart clenched because part of me wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe the tears were real, that beneath the lies and the greed, my little girl was still in there somewhere. But then the DA played the recording again, her cold words cutting through her tears. "The more people who believe you're slipping, the easier this gets. It's not personal, Mom. It's just strategy. The contrast was brutal." Even Melissa couldn't look up. Closing arguments were brutal. The DA's voice rang with conviction. Melissa Carter weaponized love. She manipulated trust. She sought to steal her mother's life before nature ever could. That is fraud. That is abuse. And that is a crime. Melissa's lawyer pleaded for mercy. "This is a family matter, not a felony. Don't criminalize a daughter's misguided love." And then it was over. The jury disappeared into deliberation. The hours stretched like days. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, Margaret at my side, Daniel pacing. Melissa sat across the hall, whispering with her lawyer. At one point, our eyes met, and for the first time in months, I saw not anger, not manipulation, just fear. For a moment, I almost stood, almost crossed the hall to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, like I had when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. But then I remembered Jacob's crumpled note. The lies she'd fed him. The look in her eyes when she told me the future was hers. and I stayed in my seat. After 6 hours, the jury returned. I held my breath as the foreman stood. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted coercion, guilty. On the charge of misrepresentation, guilty. My knees buckled. Margaret gripped my hand. Melissa gasped, shaking her head. No, no, please. The judge set sentencing for the following month. Melissa was led away, tears streaking her face. She looked at me once, just once, her eyes wide with betrayal, and I thought, this is what survival costs. That night, I sat on my porch swing under the Texas stars. I'd won. I'd survived. But the victory tasted like ashes. Because no matter what the court decided, no matter what sentence was handed down, I had lost my daughter long before the jury said guilty. Victory doesn't feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like standing in the ruins of your own life, clutching a piece of paper that says you were right, while everything you loved burns quietly in the distance. The sentencing hearing was held in mid-May, the Texas heat already thick enough to make the courthouse steps shimmer. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to the guardianship hearing months ago, the one that made me feel steady, unshakable. But inside, I was anything but steady. Melissa walked in wearing county jail khakis, her hair limp, her wrists cuffed. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. And for a split second, she wasn't the woman who had tried to erase me. She was my little girl again, the one who used to crawl into my lap with scraped knees. The judge spoke in a voice that was stern, but not cruel. Melissa Carter, this court has found you guilty of fraud, attempted coercion, and misrepresentation. In consideration of your role as a parent and your lack of prior convictions, I sentence you to 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, restitution to your mother, and 200 hours of community service. Gasps rustled through the courtroom. Melissa sagged with relief, tears spilling down her cheeks. She wasn't going to prison. Not today. I should have felt relief too. But all I felt was hollow. Afterward, Melissa turned to me as the bailiff removed her cuffs. "Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, please don't hate me." For a moment, I froze. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her I could never hate her, that everything would be okay. But the words caught in my throat, because hate wasn't the opposite of love. Indifference was. And right then, all I felt was a weary kind of indifference. I turned away without answering. The weeks that followed were a blur. Melissa moved back into her house across town. Rumors swirled. Neighbors whispered. Church folks looked at me with pity or judgment, depending on the day. Jacob and Lily called me in secret sometimes, their little voices shaky. "Mom says you ruined everything," Jacob said once. "Mom cries a lot," Lily whispered another night. Each call was a knife twist. "I love you," I told them both, every single time. "I'll always love you. That won't ever change." But the truth was, something had changed. Maybe forever. Margaret stayed close, refusing to let me drift into despair. She'd drag me to church, to lunch at the diner, even to bingo nights I swore I hated. "Evie," she said one evening as we walked home under the Texas dusk, "you can't keep replaying what happened. You survived. That's the win. Stop looking for joy in her eyes. It's gone. Start looking for it in your own." Her words stung, because they were true. I'd spent so long fighting to prove I wasn't crazy that I'd forgotten to actually live. One Saturday, I dug out an old photo album. There was Melissa at 5, missing her 2 front teeth, beaming with a popsicle in her hand. Melissa at 10, with Thomas lifting her onto his shoulders. Melissa at 18, in her graduation gown, pride shining on her face. I closed the album, tears streaming down my cheeks. The truth was, I'd lost her long before the trial. Maybe years ago. Maybe the first time she realized love could be a tool instead of a gift, and I finally admitted to myself, I couldn't save her, but I could save me. So I started small. I planted new flowers in the front yard. I joined a book club at the library. I let Margaret teach me how to make her famous peach cobbler. And little by little, my house began to feel like mine again. Not a battlefield, not a fortress, a home. The laughter of my grandchildren was still missing, but I held on to hope. Kids grow up, they see through lies. One day they'd find their way back to me. Melissa never apologized. Not once. But every so often I'd get a letter in the mail. Not from her, never from her, but from Jacob. The handwriting was messy, the words simple. Dear Grandma, I miss you. Mom says we can't see you, but I hope when I'm older I can come live with you. I love you. Love, Jacob. I tucked each letter into my journal, between the pages filled with every manipulation, every threat, every painful truth. Because that journal wasn't just evidence anymore. It was survival. Proof that I had lived through the fire and come out, scarred but standing. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Dallas, I sat on my porch swing, the cicadas buzzing, the air thick with jasmine. I closed my eyes and whispered to the night, to Thomas, to the woman I used to be. I made it. The house creaked behind me, steady and strong. My heart ached, but it still beat. And I realized that surviving your own child doesn't mean stopping love. It means learning to love yourself enough not to let that child destroy you. The war was over. The scars would remain. But so would I.